We're going to conclude this week in our Wonderful Day in the Lord broadcast with Job chapter 24. I warn you ahead of time, we're not going to leave Job in a very good place. We wish we could say Job is coming around, he's understanding better, he's moving in the right direction, but he simply does not. In his own thinking and also in the friend's counsel, he is moving backwards, if anything, and we're being exposed and he's to his sins. And Job's being exposed to his own, but he doesn't see that yet. So in chapter 24, he is complaining at God and about God that God simply does not notice things around his life. Verse 2, he says, some remove the landmarks, and they seize and devour flocks, and they drive away the donkeys of the orphans, and they take the widow's ox for a pledge, and they push the needy aside from the road, and the poor of the land are made to hide themselves together. And he goes on. So now he's saying, look, why doesn't God look around and notice all these wicked, evil people that are doing awful things? Matter of fact, very similar things that Eliphaz accused him of in a chapter or two before. He says, well, doesn't God notice these kinds of things? Doesn't he care about these things? And then he says God doesn't bring justice to the oppressed, even if he does notice. In verse 7, he says, they spend the night naked without clothing. There are no covering against the cold. They're wet with the mountain rains and hug the rock for want of shelter. Others snatch the orphans from the breast, and against the poor they take pledge. They cause the poor to go about naked without clothing, and they take away the sheaves from the hungry. And God does not care, it doesn't seem. The oppressed are under the thumb of the powerful, and God lets it happen. What kind of God do we have here? Of course, Job is thinking of himself in light of all these things, that now he's oppressed by other people and by God himself, and God doesn't care. In verse 12, he says that directly. He says, and last line, yet God does not pay attention to folly. He isn't paying attention. Does God know these things? Yes. Can God see them? Sure, certainly. Can God do something about them? If he wanted to. But God isn't paying attention. He doesn't really care right now about these oppressed people. And by the same virtue, he doesn't care about Job. What a sorry situation Job has worked himself into at this point. Matter of fact, the wicked seem to get preferential treatment from God. Look at verse 19. Drought and heat consume the snow waters, so does Sheol those who have sinned. A mother will forget him. A worm feeds sweetly till he is no longer remembered, and the wickedness will be broken like a tree. Verse 24, he says they're exalted a little while, and then they're gone. You know what he's saying? He's saying, look, God gives these wicked people special treatment. And then when they're gone, they're gone. Just like the oppressed, there's no advantage here for God to love these oppressed people and take care of them. The wicked are getting by with just about everything that they want to get by with, and God is allowing it to happen. So he moves to verse 25, and now he challenges his counselors to prove him wrong. He says this, now, if that is not so, who can prove me a liar and make my speech worthless? He's now throwing it down before his friends. And he's saying, I've said all this. I've said that God doesn't pay attention to the needy, to the oppressed. God's not, by virtue of the same thing, paying attention to me. God doesn't care. God is not taking care of these things. Now, if I'm wrong, prove it to me. Show me that I am wrong. And that's a hard thing to prove, isn't it? Because these guys have been arguing all along that God is always perfectly just, that he always brings consequences to the wicked. He always blesses the godly. And so that's been their philosophy all along. Job has shown them, and trying to show God, that that's not always the case, that there's all sorts of wicked people getting by with everything. And God doesn't seem to care, and God doesn't pay attention, and God doesn't watch over the needy. What kind of God do we have? So Job has worked himself into away from a man who was worshiping God and saying whatever happens, whatever God brings into our life or takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord, to now saying, look, I don't think God is fair. I don't think God cares, and God doesn't pay attention. Something has come unglued in Job's life. The question that we may not have a total answer to has suffering caused Job to pull away from the truth that he knew about God? or his suffering revealed to us and to Job that these things were always in his heart. They just needed to be exposed. I don't know if we have a perfect answer to that. Maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe in our own lives as well, there's a combination of such things where pain and suffering and difficulties can bring out some pretty ugly thoughts that need to be challenged by the truth. Now, God is going to cause that challenge to come about in due time. We're looking forward to those chapters. But for right now, we leave poor Job in the midst of his self-pity and in his challenge to God and to his friends. He is certainly a miserable man. Hate to leave him there this week, but the good news is things are going to get better. I hope you can keep following along with us in our study of the book of Job.